Welcome to week 10, everyone. Today, we're shifting our focus from the technical aspects of the lab to the ethical foundations that govern patient care, patient consent, and shared decision-making. As upper-level HTL technology students, you might wonder how these clinical concepts apply to your work behind the bench. The truth is, every specimen you process is the result of a patient's decision and a provider's ethical obligation. This lecture will explore the ethics in action that occurs before a specimen ever reaches your laboratory. We'll examine the legal and moral frameworks that ensure patients remain the primary decision makers in their own healthcare journeys. Understanding these principles is vital for maintaining the integrity of the entire healthcare system. By the end of this session, you'll see how the lab is tethered to the patient's right to self-determination. Let's begin our exploration of this sacred right to bodily integrity. To understand where we're going, we must briefly look back at our discussions from last week. We spent significant time analyzing errors, negligence, and the systems of accountability that exist when things go wrong in the medical field. While those topics are crucial for risk management, this week we're taking a more proactive approach. We're looking at a stage of care that occurs before anything goes wrong, the foundational interaction between patient and provider. Our focus is on the ethical safeguards designed to prevent misunderstandings and protect patient autonomy from the outset. By mastering the principles of consent now, we can better appreciate the high stakes of the diagnostic work we perform later. This shift from reactive accountability to proactive ethical engagement is a hallmark of advanced professional practice. We're moving from the what happened to the how do we ensure it's right. This proactive stance is essential for any HTL technologist who views their role as part of a larger patient-centered team. There's a fundamental shift in perspective that we must embrace as we move into this week's material. In the past, medical ethics often focus on the outcome. What happened to the patient? While outcomes remain important, the modern ethical framework asks a more nuanced question. Did the patient actually agree to this? And did they truly understand what they were agreeing to? This shift moves the focus from the technical success of a procedure to the validity of the patient's choice. It recognizes that a technically perfect surgery is still an ethical failure if the patient was misled or coerced. As HTL technologists, we're often the recipients of the tissue or specimen. However, we must remain cognizant of the how, the process that brought that specimen to us. This lecture will challenge you to think about the human being behind the slide and the quality of the consent process they underwent. We're moving toward a model where patient understanding is as valued as clinical expertise. If there's one big idea I want you to take away from today, it's this. Informed consent is not a signature, a checkbox, or a form. While those items are part of the documentation, they are not the consent itself. Consent is a process, a dynamic, ongoing communication between a healthcare provider and a patient. It's an educational exchange where information is shared, questions are answered, and a mutual understanding is reached. When we treat consent as merely a legal hurdle or a piece of paperwork, we strip it of its ethical power. For a HTL technologist, understanding this means recognizing that the consent sign node in a patient's chart represents a complex human interaction. It's a combination of a dialogue where the patient's values and the provider's expertise met. We must respect this process by ensuring our laboratory work honors the trust the patient places in the system. Remember, a signature without understanding is just ink on paper. It's not true consent. Why does the validity of consent matter so much in our field? There are three primary reasons: ethical, legal, and relational. First, without valid consent, medical care may be fundamentally unethical, violating the core principle of autonomy. Second, from a legal standpoint, performing a procedure without proper consent can be classified as battery or negligence, leading to severe liability. Third, and perhaps most importantly for the long-term health of our profession, when consent is bypassed, the trust between the patient and the healthcare system is broken. As HTL technologists, we're part of that system of trust. If a patient feels their specimen was taken without their true understanding, their faith in the entire diagnostic process, including our lab results, is undermined. We rely on the integrity of the consent process to justify our handling of human tissue. Every step we take in the lab is an extension of the patient's initial agreement to seek care. Protecting the sanctity of consent is protecting the heart of healthcare. Let's pause for a moment and consider the patient's actual experience with consent. We've talked about the stakes, but what does it really feel like from their perspective? Often, patients feel rushed, overwhelmed by medical jargon, and hesitant to ask questions. This creates a significant power imbalance, making true informed consent incredibly difficult to achieve. As future laboratory professionals, you must understand that the specimens you receive come from individuals who are likely at their most vulnerable. The voluntary nature of their consent might have been severely strained by the pressure of the situation. We cannot simply assume that a signed form means a patient was fully comfortable or informed. Recognizing these real-world challenges helps us appreciate why the consent process must be so robust. Our role is to provide the highest quality diagnostic data, honoring the difficult decisions these patients have made. This brings us to a formal definition of what informed consent truly entails. Building on our reality check, let's formally define informed consent. It's a legal and ethical concept that grants a patient the right to understand the potential risks, benefits, and alternatives of any proposed procedure. Essentially, it's a patient's voluntary agreement to a treatment, and this agreement must stem from a clear understanding of all the facts. It's not enough for a patient to simply say yes, they must truly grasp what they are agreeing to. This definition places a significant responsibility on the healthcare provider to disclose information accurately and with compassion. It also requires the provider to assess whether the patient has genuinely absorbed the information. For us in HIS technology, this means the patient has consented not just to a biopsy, but to the entire subsequent laboratory analysis that you will perform. Their voluntary agreement covers the full diagnostic journey. Understanding this definition is the crucial first step in practicing ethically grounded healthcare. Now that we've defined informed consent, let's break it down into its essential components. For consent to be truly valid, 4 core elements must be present. We call these the 4 pillars. First, there's disclosure, which is the provider's duty to share all necessary information. Second, we have comprehension, meaning the patient must actually understand what's being disclosed. Third is voluntariness, ensuring the decision is made freely, without any pressure or coercion. And finally, there's capacity, which refers to the patient's clinical ability to make a decision at that specific moment. If even one of these pillars is weak or missing, the entire consent process is compromised. As HIS technologists, we should view these elements as the quality control for the clinical side of patient care. Just as we have stringent standards for tissue processing, the clinical team has these standards for patient interaction. When we handle a specimen, we operate under the assumption that these 4 pillars were firmly in place. Let's delve deeper into each of these critical elements, starting with disclosure. The first pillar, disclosure, is all about the provider's responsibility to lay out all the facts. It's their duty to provide a complete and honest picture. This means explaining the nature of the illness, the proposed treatment, and the estimated risk of mortality and morbidity. They must also discuss common complications and the benefits of the operation. Crucially, disclosure must include all alternative forms of treatment, even the option of doing nothing at all. The patient needs to know what to expect during their hospital stay and the post-operative period. This isn't just a checklist of facts. It's about fostering a meeting of the minds where both parties are fully informed. In our histotechnology world, this might include disclosing that a tissue sample will be sent to a lab for specialized testing. The patient should understand that their diagnosis depends on this collaborative effort between the clinician and the pathologist. But what happens when this crucial step goes wrong? Unfortunately, disclosure doesn't always go as smoothly as it should. We often see common problems like rushed explanations, where providers are trying to keep to a tight schedule. Or they might use vague, overly technical language that leaves the patient completely confused. Sometimes there's an unintentional or even intentional minimizing of risk to encourage a patient to proceed with a treatment the provider believes is best. This paternalistic approach, where the doctor decides what the patient needs to know, is a major ethical red flag. When disclosure is incomplete or biased, the patient's fundamental right to self-determination is violated. As HTL technologists, we might witness the consequences of poor disclosure if a patient later expresses shock at a diagnosis or the extent of a procedure. We must remember that our accurate lab results are only one part of the patient's journey. The quality of the information they receive at the outset is equally vital. Next, we'll explore the patient's role in understanding this information. Moving beyond just disclosure, the second pillar of valid consent is comprehension. It's not enough for a provider to simply speak. The patient must genuinely understand the information presented. This means the provider must tailor the explanation to the patient's individual needs, considering their education level, language, and emotional state. We often see the teach-back method used here, where the patient rephrases the information in their own words to confirm understanding. For us in the lab, comprehension is the crucial link between the clinical discussion and the physical specimen we receive. If a patient doesn't grasp why a biopsy is necessary, they haven't truly consented to the HTL technological work we perform. We must advocate for a system where patient understanding is actively verified, not just assumed. A patient who understands the why behind their test becomes a more engaged and compliant partner in their own care. Building on the idea of true understanding, we must be acutely aware of comprehension failures. A common trap is assuming a patient's nod or silence signifies understanding or agreement. Often, a nod is a social reflex, a way to be polite or hide embarrassment about not grasping complex medical information. Silence can indicate being overwhelmed or intimidated, not consent. These surface-level cues are not valid substitutes for genuine comprehension. As healthcare professionals, we have a duty to look beyond these outward signs. In the laboratory, we may not see the patient's face, but we see the results of their decisions. If those decisions were made without true comprehension, the ethical foundation of our work becomes shaky. We should support clinical practices that prioritize clear, two-way communication. Remember, the ultimate goal of consent is a shared understanding, not just a quiet patient. Now, let's move to the third essential pillar, voluntariness. For consent to be ethically and legally valid, the patient's decision must be made freely without any pressure, coercion, or undue influence. This means the patient should not feel forced into a decision by family, insurance companies, or even their healthcare provider. A truly voluntary choice aligns with the patient's own values and life goals. In the often high-stress environment of a hospital, ensuring voluntariness can be incredibly challenging. Patients might feel compelled to agree to whatever the doctor suggests. As HTL technologists, we are the stewards of the specimens that result from these choices. We must trust that every piece of tissue we process was given to us voluntarily, as an act of the patient's own free will. This respect for the patient's choice elevates our work from a mere technical task to a professional service. Expanding on voluntariness, it's crucial to recognize that pressure in healthcare isn't always overt or obvious. It can be subtle, manifesting in a provider's tone of voice or how they frame treatment options. Sometimes, this pressure is unintentional, stemming from a provider's strong belief in a particular course of treatment. Systemic pressures also play a significant role, such as when a patient feels rushed to decide because an operating room is available or insurance authorization is expiring. These various forms of pressure can significantly erode a patient's ability to make a truly voluntary choice. As advanced students, you must be aware of these dynamics. While you may not be present when such pressure is applied, you are part of the system that must guard against it. Recognizing the potential for coercion helps us maintain a more empathetic and ethically sensitive approach to our laboratory duties. Finally, we arrive at the fourth pillar of valid consent, capacity. This refers to the patient's clinical ability to understand and evaluate the information provided to them at the precise moment the decision is being made. Capacity is not a fixed state. It can fluctuate based on factors like illness, medication, or stress. A patient might have the capacity to consent to a simple blood test, but lack it for a complex surgical procedure. It is the provider's responsibility to assess capacity before initiating the consent process. For his technologists, this means the specimens we receive should originate from individuals who were mentally present and capable of making that choice. If a patient lacks capacity, the consent process must then involve a surrogate or follow specific legal protocols. Understanding capacity helps us appreciate the intricate clinical interactions that precede our laboratory work. We just discussed capacity, the patient's clinical ability to decide. Now, let's clarify a crucial distinction between capacity and competence. These terms are often used interchangeably, but they carry very different implications in healthcare. Capacity is a clinical judgment made by a healthcare provider and is specific to a particular decision at a particular time. It can fluctuate, meaning a patient might have capacity for one decision but not another, or at one moment but not the next. Competence, on the other hand, is a legal determination typically made by a judge in a court of law. It's a global assessment of a person's overall ability to manage their affairs. A person is presumed competent until a court declares otherwise. As his technologists, we're more likely to encounter situations where a patient's capacity is being assessed. Building on our understanding of capacity, let's consider some common scenarios where a patient's ability to consent might be compromised. We're talking about situations where the standard informed consent process simply isn't possible directly with the patient. Think about patients who are unconscious due to trauma or illness, or individuals who are severely intoxicated and unable to make rational decisions. We also frequently see this with patients experiencing significant cognitive impairment, such as those with advanced dementia or acute delirium. In these cases, the ethical requirement for consent doesn't vanish, it just shifts to a different mechanism. As laboratory professionals, you will undoubtedly receive specimens from these vulnerable populations. It's vital to remember that safeguards are in place to protect their rights. The lab's role remains constant, to provide accurate data that will be used by the patient's authorized decision makers. So, what happens when capacity is indeed lacking? We'll cover that next. When a patient lacks the capacity to make their own healthcare decisions, the ethical and legal responsibility shifts. This is where surrogate decision makers come into play. A surrogate is typically a family member, a close friend, or someone legally designated in an advance directive, like a power of attorney for healthcare. Their primary role is to make decisions based on what the patient would have wanted if they were able to express their wishes. This is called substituted judgment. If the patient's wishes are unknown, the surrogate must then act in the patient's best interest. As his technologists, we should be aware that the patient decision behind our specimens might actually be a surrogate decision. This doesn't alter the technical aspects of our work, but it deepens our understanding of the ethical chain of custody. We are part of a process that strives to honor the patient's personhood even when they cannot speak for themselves. Now, let's broaden our view and look at the different types of consent we encounter in healthcare. We've spent a lot of time on informed consent, which is the gold standard for major medical procedures. But consent isn't a one-size-fits-all concept. It manifests in different forms depending on the clinical situation. Beyond informed consent, we also have express consent, which is a direct, verbal, or written agreement for simpler, more routine tasks. Think about agreeing to a blood draw or a basic physical exam. Then there's implied consent, which is inferred from a patient's actions or the circumstances, especially in emergencies. As his technologists, most of the specimens we handle come from situations involving express or informed consent. However, in trauma or emergency cases, our work might fall under the umbrella of implied consent. Understanding these different types helps us navigate the various clinical scenarios that precede our laboratory work. Each type carries its own ethical weight and legal requirements. Let's dive deeper into implied consent next. Following our discussion of the different types of consent, let's focus on implied consent, particularly in emergency situations. This is a vital concept in emergency medicine, and is based on a very practical legal presumption. The idea is that a reasonable person would consent to life-saving treatment if they were able to do so. For example, if an unconscious patient is brought into the emergency room with a life-threatening injury, the medical team can proceed with necessary procedures without waiting for formal consent. This emergency rule exists to prevent delays that could lead to death or permanent disability. In the lab, we often receive specimens under these critical conditions. While the formal process of consent was bypassed, the ethical justification remains strong. We are acting to preserve the patient's life so they can exercise their autonomy in the future. Implied consent is a powerful tool that must be used judiciously and documented thoroughly. Next, we'll explore what makes consent invalid. While implied consent is crucial in emergencies, it's just as vital to understand when consent is invalid. Consent isn't just a formality, it's a binding agreement that can be broken if certain conditions aren't met. If a patient didn't truly understand the information, if they felt pressured, or if critical details were withheld, their yes doesn't count. An invalid consent means the procedure performed could be legally considered battery, which carries serious consequences. As HASTE acknowledges, we're at the end of this process, so we need to recognize these red flags. Our commitment to quality in the lab extends to the ethical foundation of the specimens we receive. We must ensure our work upholds the integrity of the entire healthcare chain. This means being aware of how the initial consent process impacts everything that follows. It's about more than just paperwork, it's about genuine agreement. This brings us to a crucial question about the patient's actual power in the decision. Building on the idea of invalid consent, the core of the entire consent process boils down to one critical question. Did the patient truly have a choice? If a patient feels there's only one path forward or that they must agree, then genuine consent hasn't occurred. True autonomy demands the presence of real alternatives, including the option to decline treatment altogether. As advanced students, you should always consider this element of choice when reviewing case histories. The specimens we process are physical evidence of a decision made, and our work honors that decision by providing accurate diagnostic information. Remember, autonomy loses all meaning if a patient can't say no just as easily as yes. This fundamental right to refuse is a cornerstone of patient-centered care. The right to refuse treatment is perhaps the most powerful expression of patient autonomy. A competent adult has the absolute legal and ethical right to decline any medical intervention, even if that choice leads to severe consequences or even death. This isn't just a suggestion, it's a direct extension of their self-determination. In the lab, we might encounter cases where a patient initially refused a test or withdrew consent mid-procedure. We must respect these boundaries without question. The right to refuse serves as the ultimate check on medical paternalism, reminding us that the patient, not the provider, holds the final authority over their own body. This principle is so vital because it underscores the individual's unique perspective on their own health. So, why do we fiercely protect the right to refuse, even when a patient's decision seems counterintuitive to medical professionals? It's because autonomy dictates that the patient defines what's best for themselves, based on their personal values, beliefs, and life goals. A provider's definition of best interests might not align with the patient's, and that's their right. For instance, a patient might prioritize quality of life over extending it with aggressive treatment. As HASTE technologists, our role is to remain neutral and professional, regardless of our personal opinions on a patient's choices. Our job is to provide accurate data. The patient's job is to decide how to use it. Respecting this right is a fundamental aspect of being a healthcare professional, even when it creates tension for the provider. It's completely natural for providers to feel a sense of discomfort or even frustration when a patient refuses a treatment they genuinely believe is necessary. This is where the ethical tension between autonomy, the patient's right to decide, and beneficence, the provider's duty to do good, becomes acutely real. A provider might think, if only they understood what I know, they would agree. However, ethical practice demands that we cannot impose our idea of good on a competent patient. As you advance in your careers, you will inevitably encounter these complex tensions. In the lab, you might process specimens from cases where significant disagreement existed between the patient and the clinical team. Understanding this inherent tension helps us maintain a professional and empathetic approach to our laboratory duties. This ethical tightrope walk is a constant in healthcare. We've just explored the inherent tension when a provider's best intentions meet a patient's autonomy. Now, let's quickly review the fundamental patient rights that underpin all ethical healthcare interactions. These aren't just abstract concepts, they are the bedrock of a respectful patient-provider relationship. Patients have the right to know, to ask, to decide, and crucially, to refuse. These rights are legally protected and form the ethical framework for all medical practice. As technologists, we play a critical role in upholding these rights, even from behind the microscope. Every accurate result we provide supports the patient's right to know the truth about their health. These rights ensure that patients remain central to their own care decisions. They are the framework that guides our collective responsibility to the patient. Understanding these rights helps us appreciate the ethical chain of custody for every specimen. Let's delve deeper into each of these rights, starting with the right to information. Building on our overview of patient rights, the right to information is more than just handing over a stack of papers. It demands clear, understandable explanations, delivered in a language the patient comprehends. This means avoiding medical jargon and adjusting the pace to suit the patient's needs. Professional interpreters are vital here, ensuring no communication barriers exist. As laboratory professionals, we contribute to this right by producing clear and accurate reports. While our primary audience is the clinician, the information we generate ultimately reaches the patient. The clarity of our lab work directly supports the clarity of the information the patient receives. This ensures they can make truly informed decisions about their health. It's about empowering the patient with knowledge, not overwhelming them with data. Next, we'll discuss the patient's right to engage with that information. Following the right to clear information, patients also possess the fundamental right to ask questions without fear of judgment or dismissal. Creating a safe space where patients feel comfortable voicing concerns is paramount for ethical care. A healthcare culture that actively encourages questions is one that prioritizes patient safety and understanding. As advanced students, you should champion this openness in all clinical settings. In the lab, we embody the spirit of inquiry by performing rigorous quality checks and seeking clarification when specimen histories are unclear. This proactive approach ensures the integrity of our diagnostic process. When a patient asks a question, they are actively participating in their care, and we must honor that. This leads us directly to the broader concept of patient participation in their own healthcare journey. Having established the importance of asking questions, we now turn to the broader right to participate, which signifies a shift from passive acceptance to active engagement in one's own care. Modern healthcare views patients as active partners, not just recipients of treatment. This right forms the very bedrock of shared decision-making. As HIS technologists, our work, though behind the scenes, is what enables this participation. Without the precise diagnostic data we provide, neither the patient nor the provider could make truly informed decisions. We are the silent partners in the patient's journey, providing the objective information needed for their active role. Our accuracy empowers patients to become informed advocates for their own health. This active participation underscores the importance of every step we take in the lab. Now, let's revisit a particularly challenging aspect of patient autonomy, the right to refuse. We've discussed the right to refuse previously, but it bears revisiting because it's often the most challenging right to uphold in practice. This right applies even when providers strongly disagree with a patient's choice, and even when the outcome of that refusal might be severe. It is the ultimate test of our commitment to patient autonomy. In the lab, we must maintain our professional standards regardless of a patient's choices. If a patient refuses a crucial follow-up test, we must respect that decision, ensuring it's properly documented. Our role is to provide the best possible service within the boundaries set by the patient themselves. This unwavering dedication to their choices, even the difficult ones, is what defines ethical practice. This brings us to the collaborative approach of shared decision-making, which seeks to balance these complex rights. We've spent a lot of time on the patient's right to refuse, which is a powerful expression of autonomy. Now, let's explore how patients and providers can actively work together to make healthcare decisions. This is where shared decision-making, or SDM, comes into play. SDM is a collaborative process where the healthcare provider and the patient join forces to determine the best course of action. It's not just the doctor dictating treatment, nor is it the patient making choices in isolation. Instead, it blends the provider's clinical knowledge with the patient's personal values and life circumstances. As health technologists, our lab results are a crucial piece of this puzzle. We provide objective evidence that informs these shared conversations. Our work directly contributes to the foundation of these collaborative decisions. Understanding STM helps us appreciate the ethical weight of the data we generate. It's about ensuring the patient's voice is heard and respected. This collaborative approach leads to more personalized and effective care. Let's contrast this modern approach with how decisions were traditionally made. To truly grasp the value of shared decision-making, we need to understand the model it aims to replace: the traditional paternalistic approach. In this older model, the doctor was seen as the ultimate authority, making all decisions for the patient. The phrase "doctor knows best" perfectly encapsulates this mindset. Patients were often expected to simply comply with medical advice with little to no input on their own care. While this approach often stemmed from a genuine desire to help, it frequently overlooked the patient's autonomy and personal preferences. It created a power imbalance where the patient's role was largely passive. As we strive for more ethical and patient-centered care, we must move beyond this paternalistic way of thinking. In the lab, this means recognizing that our results serve the patient directly, not just the clinician's directives. We are part of a system that is evolving. This shift is crucial for fostering trust and respect in healthcare. Now, let's look at the modern model that champions collaboration. Moving beyond the paternalistic approach, the modern model of healthcare emphasizes true collaboration. This model recognizes that both the provider and the patient bring unique and essential expertise to the decision-making table. The provider is the expert on the disease, treatment options, and medical evidence. But the patient is the undeniable expert on their own body, their values, their priorities, and what truly matters to them in life. This partnership ensures that decisions are not only clinically sound, but also aligned with the patient's personal goals. When patients are active participants, they are more likely to adhere to treatment plans and feel satisfied with their care. As HIS technologists, we are integral to this collaborative team. Our objective data provides a factual basis for these discussions. We are the data experts who empower this modern, ethical approach to patient care. This collaborative spirit is what truly defines patient-centered healthcare. So, what are the specific components that make up this collaborative process? So, what does shared decision-making actually look like in practice? Think of it as a recipe with several key ingredients. First, there's a thorough discussion of the patient's condition, ensuring they understand their diagnosis. Next, all available treatment options are presented, including the pros and cons of each, and even the option of doing nothing. Crucially, the conversation explores the patient's values, preferences, and life goals, integrating them into the decision. Finally, the provider applies their clinical expertise to tailor the information to the specific patient. It's a rich, multi-layered conversation, not a quick checklist. For us in the lab, this means our results must be clear and comprehensive, directly supporting these detailed discussions. A well-documented pathology report becomes a vital tool for SDM. We contribute the options and expertise ingredients to the patient's decision-making process. Our accuracy and clarity directly empower this ethical approach. This comprehensive approach ensures decisions are truly informed and personalized. But why is all this effort so important? Why should we invest so much effort in shared decision-making? Simply put, because it yields significant benefits for everyone involved. Research consistently shows that SDM leads to better patient understanding of their condition and treatment options. Patients who participate in decisions are also more likely to adhere to their treatment plans, leading to improved health outcomes. Perhaps most importantly, SDM fosters higher levels of trust in the healthcare system. When patients feel heard and respected, they develop a stronger sense of ownership over their care. As histotechnologists, we benefit from this increased trust. A patient who trusts the system is more likely to value the critical work we do in the lab. SDM isn't just an ethical ideal, it's a practical strategy for enhancing the quality and effectiveness of healthcare. It builds a stronger bridge between patients and the entire medical team. However, implementing STM isn't always easy, and there are real-world hurdles to overcome. While shared decision-making offers clear benefits, its implementation faces significant real-world hurdles. We've seen how STM improves outcomes and builds trust, but it's not always easy to achieve. Major barriers often include the severe time constraints in busy clinical settings. Also, the persistent use of complex medical jargon can easily exclude patients from true understanding. And of course, there's the inherent power imbalance between a highly knowledgeable provider and a vulnerable patient. These obstacles can make STM feel like an ideal rather than a practical necessity. As futurist technologists, you must be aware of these barriers. You should actively look for ways to overcome them in your own practice. In the lab, we can contribute by ensuring our communication with the clinical team is always clear and timely. This helps reduce at least one source of stress in the patient's decision-making process. Understanding these challenges is the first step toward truly patient-centered care. Building on the idea of barriers, power dynamics represent an invisible yet incredibly powerful force in healthcare. Patients often instinctively defer to authority figures, and they might avoid asking questions to prevent appearing difficult. This can inadvertently lead to a false consent, where the patient agrees simply because they feel they have no other choice. As system technologists, we must remain sensitive to these subtle dynamics. While we don't interact directly with the patient, we should advocate for a laboratory culture that values transparency and patient-centeredness. Recognizing the inherent power we hold as experts helps us stay humble. It keeps us focused on our ultimate goal, serving the patient with integrity. This awareness helps us bridge the gap between clinical interaction and laboratory work. Now, let's shift our focus to the bedrock of all healthcare, including HIS technology, the core ethical principles. These principles are the foundation of our work, guiding every decision we make. We're talking about autonomy, the patient's right to decide for themselves. Then there's beneficence, our duty to act in the patient's best interests. Non-maleficence is a solemn promise to do no harm. And finally, justice, which ensures the fair and equitable distribution of care. These principles often exist in a delicate tension with one another. Navigating that tension is truly the heart of ethical practice. As you process slides and manage specimens, these principles should always be in the back of your mind. They serve as the moral compass that ensures our technical skills are always used for the right reasons. We'll explore each of these in more detail, starting with autonomy. Autonomy is arguably the most prominent principle in our discussion of patient consent and shared decision-making. It embodies the fundamental idea that every individual possesses the inherent right to make their own decisions about their body and their life. In the context of healthcare, this means the patient remains the ultimate decision-maker regarding their care. As system technologists, we uphold autonomy by ensuring that the specimens we handle were obtained through a truly valid consent process. We are, in essence, the guardians of the physical evidence of the patient's autonomous choices. Every slide we meticulously create is a testament to the patient's right to seek a diagnosis and to make an informed plan for their own health. This principle underpins the entire ethical framework of patient care, leading us directly to our next crucial principle. Following autonomy, we arrive at beneficence, which is our unwavering duty to act in ways that genuinely benefit the patient. In the laboratory, this translates directly into performing our work with the absolute highest level of accuracy and efficiency. We do good by providing the precise diagnostic information that will ultimately lead to the best possible treatment outcomes. However, it's crucial to remember that our concept of good must always be carefully balanced with the patient's autonomy. We simply cannot force a benefit on a patient who has competently refused it. Beneficence truly represents the heart of our profession, driving us to excel in our technical tasks for the sake of the human being at the other end of the microscope. This commitment to doing good is intrinsically linked to avoiding harm, which we'll discuss next. Non-maleficence is the bedrock principle of do no harm, a fundamental tenet in all medical practice. For us in HIS technology, this means we actively prevent errors that could lead to misdiagnosis or delayed treatment. Think about it. A lost specimen, a mislabeled slide, or a contaminated sample directly violates this crucial principle. We uphold do no harm by maintaining rigorous quality control and meticulously following all safety protocols in the lab. This principle acts as a vital safety net for our profession, constantly reminding us that our technical mistakes carry profound real-world consequences for patients. Every single step we take in the laboratory is an opportunity to honor this promise and protect those we serve. This commitment to safety and accuracy is just as important as our duty to do good, which we discussed previously. Sometimes, ethical principles don't align perfectly. They can actually clash, creating complex dilemmas. A classic example arises when a provider firmly believes a specific treatment is in the patient's best interest, embodying beneficence, but the patient, exercising their autonomy, refuses it. So, who ultimately prevails in such a scenario? In modern medical ethics, a competent patient's autonomy almost always takes precedence. As his technologists, we might observe these conflicts reflected in a clinical history accompanying a specimen. Understanding this inherent clash helps us maintain a professional and non-judgmental stance in our work. We are an integral part of a system that deeply values the patient's right to choose, even when that choice might seem clinically counterintuitive. This tension highlights the nuanced reality of ethical decision-making in healthcare. Real-life ethical situations are rarely straightforward. They're often filled with shades of grey and difficult tensions. Navigating these complexities demands more than just rote adherence to rules. It requires sharp critical thinking, profound empathy, and unwavering commitment to professional values. As advanced students, you're actively developing the skills to navigate this intricate landscape. In the lab, you will undoubtedly encounter cases that challenge your preconceived ethical assumptions. By firmly grounding yourselves in the principles of autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice, you can approach these challenges with both confidence and integrity. Remember, ethics is a continuous practice, not merely a theoretical concept to be memorized. This complexity underscores why communication becomes so critically important in bridging these gaps. Throughout our discussion today, one central theme has consistently emerged: communication is absolutely essential. Clear, honest, and compassionate communication is the very foundation that makes informed consent and shared decision-making truly possible. It acts as the vital bridge, connecting the provider's specialized expertise with the patient's unique values and preferences. As his technologists, we are an indispensable part of this crucial communication chain. Our laboratory reports are a direct form of communication that must be clear, accurate, and delivered in a timely manner. By excelling in our laboratory communication, we directly support the ethical interactions that occur at the patient's bedside. We are all engaged in the same overarching conversation about the patient's health and well-being. But what happens when this bridge of communication breaks down? When communication falters, the consequences can be severe and far-reaching. It inevitably leads to invalid consent, profound patient confusion, and a significant breakdown of trust within the healthcare system. Beyond these ethical concerns, poor communication can also directly contribute to medical errors and expose institutions to legal liability. The cost of ineffective communication is incredibly high, impacting both ethical standards and practical outcomes. As laboratory professionals, we must remain constantly vigilant against any communication breakdowns. Whether it's a missing piece of crucial clinical information or a confusing lab result, we have a professional obligation to proactively clarify and communicate. Our unwavering commitment to clear communication is a direct commitment to the safety and dignity of every patient we serve. This directly contrasts with the robust communication we just discussed. Documentation is often seen as just paperwork, but it's actually the critical record of the entire consent process. It provides the tangible evidence that disclosure happened, that capacity was assessed, and that consent was truly obtained. As HIS technologists, we are heavy users of documentation in our daily work. We rely on accurate clinical notes and precise specimen labels to perform our tasks correctly and safely. We also have a fundamental duty to document our own work thoroughly and accurately, ensuring a clear chain of custody and accountability. Good documentation isn't just a bureaucratic step. It's a hallmark of a professional and ethical laboratory practice. It ensures transparency and traceability, which are vital for patient safety and quality assurance. This commitment to meticulous record-keeping reflects our dedication to the patient's well-being. It's how we uphold the integrity of the entire diagnostic pathway. Remember, our work in the lab is only as good as the information that supports it. This leads us to a common misconception about consent. We absolutely must debunk the common misconception I call the consent form myth. This is the dangerous idea that a signed form by itself is sufficient proof of informed consent. But a signature can be obtained without any real understanding or true voluntariness from the patient. As we've discussed throughout this lecture, true consent is a dynamic, ongoing process, not merely a static piece of paper. In the lab, we should always be aware that a signed consent in a patient's chart is only the very beginning of the story. We need to look for evidence of a robust and meaningful consent process within the broader clinical narrative. Our work honors the spirit of the consent, which involves genuine understanding and choice, not just the ink on a form. A form is a record, but it's not the conversation itself. This distinction is crucial for ethical practice. Let's consider a practical example of where this myth can lead us astray. Let's consider a real-world example that illustrates the dangers of the consent form myth. Imagine a patient who signs a consent form quickly in the pre-operative area. They feel rushed, perhaps intimidated, and they certainly don't want to delay their scheduled surgery. Later, this patient expresses significant regret because they didn't realize a particular risk was involved, a risk that was either not fully disclosed or not truly understood. This scenario represents a clear failure of the consent process, even though a form was technically signed and filed. As histologists, we might unfortunately see the fallout of such cases in the form of patient complaints, legal inquiries, or even adverse outcomes. This example powerfully reminds us why the quality of the patient-provider interaction matters so much more than just checking a box. We must actively support a healthcare culture that prioritizes adequate time and genuine understanding over mere speed and administrative checkboxes. The consequences of such rushed decisions can be severe, both for the patient and the healthcare system. And these consequences often extend into the legal realm. When the consent process fails, the legal implications can be quite severe and far-reaching. Invalid consent can directly lead to significant liability for battery or medical malpractice, which can have devastating consequences for providers and institutions. This can result in costly lawsuits, substantial financial penalties, and irreparable damage to a healthcare provider's professional reputation. As laboratory professionals, we are not immune to these legal risks, even though we don't obtain consent directly. If our work becomes part of a case where consent was found to be lacking or invalid, we may be called upon to provide detailed documentation or even expert testimony. Maintaining the highest ethical and professional standards in the lab is truly our best defense against potential legal challenges. We must always strive to be part of a system that is both legally sound and ethically grounded in every aspect of patient care. This is about protecting everyone involved. But beyond the law, there's an even higher standard we must consider. Even if a medical procedure is technically legal in the eyes of the law, it may still be profoundly unethical if the consent process was fundamentally flawed. Ethics, you see, asks a much higher question than mere legality. It asks not just, is it allowed, but is it truly right? As his technologists, we should always strive for this higher ethical standard in our daily practice. Our commitment to the patient extends far beyond simply following rules. It involves a deep and abiding respect for their inherent dignity and their right to autonomy. By consistently focusing on the ethical implications of our work, we actively elevate our profession and contribute to a higher, more compassionate level of patient care. Doing what's right, even when it's challenging or inconvenient, is the ultimate goal of ethics in action within healthcare. This ethical compass guides every decision we make. Now, let's connect all of this directly to your role in the lab. So, we've talked about ethical implications, but how does this all connect directly to you, the HIS technologist? You might not be the one obtaining consent, but your work absolutely depends on it. Every single specimen you process is the direct result of a patient's decision to trust the healthcare system. If that trust is broken through a poor consent process, the integrity of your work is also compromised. As his technologist, you are the crucial stewards of that patient's tissue. You carry a profound ethical responsibility to handle a tissue with the utmost care and to provide the most accurate results possible. Your meticulous work is the fulfillment of the patient's consent to seek a diagnosis. You are a vital and indispensable link in the ethical chain of care. Understanding this connection elevates your role beyond just technical tasks. It makes your contribution deeply meaningful. Let's explore your specific ethical duties in the lab. Building on that connection, what are your specific ethical responsibilities once a specimen reaches your lab? Your duties include ensuring accurate and timely testing, which is paramount for patient safety. You must also use specimens only for their intended and consented purposes, never deviating from the patient's agreement. Maintaining a constant awareness of the profound impact your work has on a patient's life is also critical. Furthermore, you must rigorously protect patient confidentiality and meticulously follow all safety and quality protocols. These responsibilities are the very essence of ethics in action within the histotechnology profession. By excelling in these areas, you honor the patient's trust and contribute significantly to a more ethical and effective healthcare system. Your role might seem small in scale, but its impact is truly massive. We must always remember the human element behind our work. Continuing from your specific duties, let's zoom out to the big picture. Never ever forget that every specimen you handle represents a person. Behind every single slide you prepare is a human story, a unique set of values, and a life that will be profoundly affected by your work. This powerful realization should drive you to perform your duties with the highest level of care and unwavering integrity. You are not just processing tissue, you are providing the critical data that will shape a person's future. By consistently keeping the patient at the absolute center of your work, you ensure that your technical skills are always used for the right reasons. This deep understanding is truly the heart of professional histotechnology. Now, let's consolidate these thoughts into our key takeaways. So, as we bring our discussion to a close, let's quickly review the most important takeaways from today's lecture. Always remember that consent is a dynamic process, not just a static form to be signed. Understanding is the most critical and foundational part of that entire process. Autonomy is a patient's fundamental right to make their own decisions about their body and care. And finally, clear, compassionate communication is the essential bridge that makes it all possible. These core principles form the bedrock of ethical healthcare. As you move forward in your studies and your professional careers, keep these vital takeaways firmly in mind. They will undoubtedly guide you through the complex ethical challenges you will face. Thank you for your unwavering commitment to being ethical and professional histotechnologists. I have one final thought for you. I'll leave you with this final crucial thought. Anyone can easily get a signature on a form, but not everyone ensures that the patient truly understands what they are signing. And that difference, the profound difference between a mere checkbox and a genuine, meaningful conversation, matters deeply. It matters immensely for the patient's dignity and their sense of control. It matters for the provider's integrity and the professional standing. And it matters for the fundamental trust that holds our entire healthcare system together. As his technologist, you're an integral part of the team that makes that vital difference. Your meticulous work honors the patient's understanding and supports their autonomous choices. Thank you for your focused attention today, and I genuinely look forward to seeing how you apply these ethical principles in your future laboratory practice.